Om Shanti. Welcome to all of you to the episode 15th on economy in the Values for Life series episode. Just spend a minute in silence to invoke the Supreme Being. So, welcome all of you, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the viewers from different parts of the world. And welcome once again. It gives me a lot of pleasure because we are in the month of June, and we fondly remember Mama, whom we used to call Jagdamba Saraswati Ma at Brahma Kumaris, being her month, and she was an embodiment of economy. I'm sure Sister Jayanti will tell us a lot of stories about her examples of how economy Mama used to practice in her even spiritual dealings, I must say. So this episode of economy is dedicated to Mama because it's the month of June, and we are very fortunate that Sister Jayanti has joined us. And we first of all would like the Vancouver team, Sister Anu and Sister Claudia, both to welcome Sister Jayanti for the same. Over to you. You have to unmute yourself, Claudia, sister.
Om Shanti, Sister Jayanti, in the name of everyone from all over the world, not only Vancouver and Canada, but all over. We are welcome you to talk with us about economy. Economy is so important in life. Economy of our thoughts, economy of our life, economy of our wealth, economy over everything. So it's a so important topic. Thank you for coming and welcome to our program.
Thank you very much. It's my privilege.
And I pass to Anu to give you some flowers, to offer you some flowers.
Dear Jayanti Didi, on behalf of the whole team of Values for Life series and everyone who is watching today, we want to welcome you to our program with this beautiful bouquet of flowers. Thank you so much, Didi, for giving us the time today, and welcome.
Thank you very much. It is very beautiful.
Thank you indeed, Sister Anu and Sister Claudia, for the beautiful welcome and the beautiful flowers as well, I must say. I'm sure all of you know Didi Jayanti very well, but it's my duty to introduce her because there are quite a few new participants, Didi, who all the time join the program. And I would say I know Didi again since many few years now, since my visit to London. And all of you know that she's being labeled as flying angel. She's indeed a flying angel. And if you look at her, she exudes that humility, that sweetness. I remember the humility talk which Didi had given last time. And let me just tell you a brief about her. She's basically from Pune, where I belong to. So it's like very fond remembrance that Didi also belongs to the same place. And she was very young when she came into this knowledge, but she finally got surrendered at the age of around 19. And what when I look at her biodata is basically three important dimensions she's worked on. The first one being environment. And since 2009, she has headed the BK delegation to the United Nations on climate change. And she has represented the organization many times and has spoke on many such events about climate change. The second thing is about women's needs. And she was a delegate way back in 1975 to the International Women's Year Conference held at Berlin. And she also has started the United Nations Decade Program for Women and Women's Issues. And the third one is Sister Jayanti is an advisor. We are all very proud because she's an advisor to the Council for the Parliament of the World's Religions. And she really is on the executive committee as well of the interfaith groups. And coming to Brahma Kumaris, let me just tell you, she really has diverse roles. She is the director of the BK International Coordinating Office in London. All of you know it's GCH, Global Cooperation House. Along with that, the Global Retreat Center in Oxford, and also the director of BK centers in many countries in the Europe and the Middle East. She has also been instrumental in developing centers all over the world, right from Hong Kong to the Caribbean, even Japan, South Africa. And as I told you, she's one of our representatives towards the United Nations. So she's really done a lot of work, as I mentioned, about the environment. And she has also written a few books, inspiring books on spirituality in daily life. And very humbly, Didi always mentions that her day-to-day work includes spiritual teaching and providing spiritual guidance to many of the students of Brahma Kumaris like us who really enjoy the way she reads the Murlis and her sharings, all about the Murlis, the way she does it. It's beautiful. And there are many key speaking engagements. Just to tell you the latest one of 2020, she did this in Reykjavik. It's in Iceland. The topic was Faith for Nature, Multi-Faith Action. And this was organized by the United Nations Environmental Organization in collaboration with the government of Iceland. So this is about Didi's introduction. And let me just give you a few housekeeping instructions before we start with the talk. You all can see the interpretation icon is there in the bottom. You all can click on that and select the language you want to listen to in. And the Didi's talk would be for say around 45 minutes, after which we'll have our question and answer session for around 15 minutes. So you all can start sending your questions maybe by around 45 minutes from now onwards. And it will be only sent to the co-host or me. So you all can start doing that later. And with this, I would just now request Jayanti Didi to please carry on with economy. Thank you, Didi, for joining.
Om Shanti. It's my pleasure to join you for this particular series of values in life, because values are the fundamental foundation of human beings, of our own personal life, but also of civilization. And when values begin to disappear, then we also begin to see the collapse of society. And you can judge for yourself where it is we're at now in terms of the world cycle. We go through day and night, and in recent times, we've been through a very, very dark night. But hopefully, as we again emerge, the values that lie within us, because all of us carry those values, but we've forgotten because we've connected with the world outside rather than the world inside. And when we start connecting with the world inside, then we become aware of our own inner core values and we start expressing them in our life. And that is the way in which we will move from darkness into light. Yes, the one up above is responsible to give us the insight, the light, the might to help us move forward into the day. But our job is to be able to take all that the one above gives us and to use it so that then we're actually able to come back to a state in which it's values that are living in our life and not just things that we talk about, but hopefully things that are visible and relevant in the world today. And so economy. Maybe not everyone would have thought about economy as being a value, and yet it is absolutely very much a well-needed part of life today, because many of the problems that we see in today's world, and in particular, I'm thinking about the issue with poverty, inequity, the situation of inequality, where there is such a big gap between the haves, a very tiny percentage, and the have-nots. And remembering Mahatma Gandhi, that our great philosopher and saint told us, there's enough in the world for every person's need, but not enough for a single person's greed. Interesting, isn't it? And yes, this is what we are seeing, that when there is greed, it doesn't matter how much I already have. The only thing that comes in my mind is I want multiplication. I want more. I want to think about not just me and my grandchildren. I want to think about 8 generations ahead. And so things like this. And so very much needed at this time. And maybe perhaps you haven't made the connection between economy and ecology. But it is again the same root. We are talking about the home, and on one side, we're talking about the economy in our home and our budgeting, but also ecology. We're talking about the bigger home, our home, this planet. And where we've gone astray is perhaps that materialism has led us into very fast track of buying and spending and using and throwing away. And we now have to actually learn to economize, not just for the sake of our budget, but for the well-being of the planet and the whole of humanity. We'd never imagined that economy is something that was connected with ecology, but yet, in fact, it is very much that case. Excuse me. And this is because it's materialism on a very excessive, gross level that has caused us to use more than 3 times the resources of the planet. It's just a tickle, it'll go away. And so at a time like this, if we reduce, if we reuse, if we recycle, that is economy, then definitely it's a major contribution to the ecology also. So I just wanted to put that into the larger picture of why economy at this moment is so absolutely essential. And of course, given the situation with COVID, the world's economies have absolutely been shattered. How many countries have now come into huge, huge debt? And of course, how can they settle that debt? It's going to be coming from the taxes out of our pockets. And so it's not just even individual economy, but if we think about the state of the world, then definitely the economy is absolutely in a very dire state and is rocking. And so on my very personal level, what can I do? Yes, I need to economize, but not just in terms of my expenditure, but in terms of first and foremost, my own inner world. By now, you also understood that spirituality and values begin inside and then they reach outside. So we've been looking at the state of the world outside, but there's very little that one can do in terms of sorting things out for the whole world. But what I can do is sort things out within myself first. And I was very interested when a little while earlier, a famous corporate business guru, he doesn't wear saffron clothes, he wears a suit, but yet he is very much termed the guru of the corporate world. He said in the workshop he was leading, the workshop was entitled Outer Systemic Change Needs Deep personal change. It's a mantra that we've been using in the organization of the Brahma Kumaris for decades. And we talk about when I change, then the world can change. And the founder, Brahma Baba, and the Mama, the person we're honoring this month, Mateshwari Ji, she would also say, economy is at the heart of everything. And although they said these things decades ago and we understood and we started to practice and follow, when I used to talk about changing my own values, and through that systemic change could happen, the world could change, there was always a question, but how? And people weren't easily able to connect with the two. But apartheid and the whole structure of apartheid being dismantled, how did that all happen? Amazingly, without a civil war or bloodshed. It happened because one individual, Mr. F.W. Clark, had the inspiration and the deep moral understanding that this system of injustice could not continue. He had to convince his cabinet, they had to convince their electorate, then of course the rest is history. So one individual can bring about change. I've seen this happen in recent times in many, many different ways, but it also applies to each and every one of us. Let me change so that it has a change in my little world, but also it can have a huge change and an impact in the world around me too. So how do I begin? And spirituality says, I begin with myself inside, and I begin with the treasures that I carry within my own inner world. And those treasures are the value of my thoughts, the value of my words and actions, the value of my own time. These are essential treasures that I have. And the way I use these, whether I waste them or use them in a negative direction, or I use them for a higher purpose, is going to determine whether I'm able to support the world or I pull the world down even further. They say that when you lift your finger, you move the stars. But when I create a thought, I'm creating my destiny, and not just my destiny for myself, but it's also impacting many, many others around me. And so what should I be doing with my thoughts? I should be monitoring the quality of my thoughts as well as the quantity of my thoughts. How often have you seen people who think a lot, or even we would say who overthink, and yet not very much is happening in their life in terms of anything that's creative or constructive? This is because when there are too many thoughts, then none of those thoughts carry the power or the concentration capacity to be able to be fulfilled in my life. But when I'm careful with the quantity of my thinking, I'm more likely to be more elevated in my thinking. Fewer thoughts are likely to be on a higher level, are likely to be powerful, elevated, and filled with strength, so that then they can actually materialize and be of value in my life and make a difference to the lives of others also. You've seen how when there's too much of anything, it's difficult to look after. If you've got too many weeds growing in your garden, you'll throw your hands up in horror and say, where can I begin? But if you've been nurturing your garden and sustaining it well, then a few weeds come up. They will, here and there, but you can deal with them. And so you'll be able to give your attention to the flowers and the weeds will go. Same thing, what's going on in here? Many, many weeds, or even perhaps a big jungle with many thorns that's causing me sorrow. And of course, if there's something that's causing me sorrow, what am I going to do? I'm probably going to give sorrow to others. They say that hurt people hurt people. Why is it that somebody keeps hurting others? It's because they carry hurt within themselves. And maybe the hurt hasn't been caused by other people. Maybe the hurt has been caused through my own negative thinking. Walk into a garden where there are many weeds. There'll also probably be many thorns. And so you need to protect yourself. You can't just go out like that. You need to wear boots so that you're protected. But if you're walking in a garden, you can walk in your bare feet. You don't even need slippers or shoes or big, hard shoes. So take a walk around in your mind. What's going on in here? Are there beautiful flowers and roses growing? Or are there many, many weeds and thorns that are not going to serve any purpose in any way? So starting inside, looking at first just the quantity. And this is why meditation is a very helpful tool. First and foremost, to bring economy to the mind, because I learn to take a pause. There's many, many thoughts. Okay, hold on. Let me take a pause and let me come to the awareness of the inner being and connect with myself. When I connect with myself, then I'm more likely to express the inner core values that I carry within myself. And so taking a pause, slowing down the traffic of thoughts is the first step towards economy of thoughts. But also, when there's fewer thoughts, it's more likely that I'll be able to nurture every thought and make it powerful and precious and valuable. Too many thoughts and they're out of control. Something goes wrong. What's my reaction? Is it to say Om Shanti to myself and take a moment of peace? And then just in that state of peace, I'll be able to spread a little bit of calm in the chaos that's happening around me. And then further, probably my mind will be clear enough to find a solution to deal with the situation. The other way, something goes wrong and my mind is racing, racing, racing. Probably my words are also going to be out of control and I'm going to regret the words that I've spoken. When you've spoken in haste, have you shared wisdom at that time? Have you shared calmness and peace at that time? Probably not. And so I have to learn to have economy in my thinking. Fewer thoughts, powerful, positive, elevated thoughts. And those thoughts are going to take on a practical form, which is going to be of service to others, but also value and benefit to myself. Economy of words. How long do I need to express myself? I remember many years ago, I was at a UN conference and they put up 4 mics in 4 corners of the room. And they were inviting us to ask questions. But they said it wasn't a time for speeches. It was a time for questions. And the mic would be cut off by the people who were organizing after a minute. And it was interesting how many people were caught out mid-sentence because their thoughts were not clear. They had not been able to express themselves within a minute. Good point for everybody who's going to be asking questions later. Question time isn't a time for speeches, but it's a time for inquiry and understanding further clarification. So at that moment, I realized that if your mind is very clear, then you know what is the essential thing that needs to be said in terms of the question that is being asked. And sometimes when we've given our speakers 3 minutes to speak, they'll say, it's impossible. How am I supposed to express myself in 3 minutes? I remind them, when you hear news on the radio, how long does it take to hear the news? You're driving along, you switch on, it's 5 o'clock, it's 6 o'clock, and the news of the world gets to you in 3 minutes flat. 3 minutes. And you know everything that's going on in the world. And so just see, am I able to summarize all the many things that I want to say in 3 minutes? And for sure, it's possible to get a message across in 3 minutes. And sometimes, of course, people want your time, your company, and 3 minutes isn't enough, but that's another part of the equation. But a message that's important can be delivered in 3 minutes. So am I taking too long to express myself? Most times, probably yes. Can I reduce it and still have the same impact? Definitely. Why? Because, for example, today I've been allocated 45 minutes to talk, which is quite a long time, which is wonderful. But I bet you, probably the things you'll remember could be encapsulated in 3 minutes. Afterwards, if people were to say to you, well, what is all that about? You'd be able to summarize it in 3 minutes, I'm sure. And so always, in essence, is powerful and can be retained. Nobody can retain things of 45 minutes, but 3 minutes summary, yes, that's possible. So let me value my words. And maybe sometimes when I'm really wanting to speak, let me ask myself the question, is it necessary? Is it adding value to the discussion? Is it going to be helpful to the other individual? Is it useful? And most of all, is it true? Ask yourself these questions before you speak. And sometimes you'll probably find that it's better to be silent, especially in a heated argument when things are like popcorn, moving here and here and here and here. At that moment, is my contribution useful? Probably not. There's too many things that are flying around. Let me use the power of thought and share good vibrations so that there can be calm in the room. And instead of coming from here and here and here and here, everybody begins to think in a more elevated way, a purer way, and we're able to move forward. I remember in one of the COP climate change conferences, we had a panel, and one of the people speaking was a high official within the organizational team. And he was sharing how when there are people at the negotiation table, and you can imagine all the countries of the world have their own agenda. they don't have the same agenda. I don't need to spell that out to you. But he said, if we're just looking at our own nation states, we will have our own agenda. But when we think on a higher level, then we realize that our goal is the same: to save the human species, to save the future of the planet. And when we're ready to think in a more elevated way, then we don't need to spend hours till 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning in negotiations and word here and a word there and a paragraph there, because that's what usually happens in the negotiations. They have a thick document, but they go through it line by line, word by word, and there's debate and discussion. He said that when we begin to think on the higher goal, what is all this about? What is the purpose of this? Then we begin to see that actually we don't need to have a huge debate. Then there's a consensus of the steps we need to take to achieve our goal. And it was a very wise statement. He had been reflecting on his own experience at COP, but it applies in all situations. If I'm thinking about myself from a selfish perspective, and a few others are doing the same, the whole night can go by and we'll still be in discussion. And discussion means percussion, noise, a lot of noise. When you've got percussion instruments, there's a lot of noise. So there's a lot of noise, but maybe not very much wisdom. But if we say, okay, let's spend a few moments in silence, and we go in silence to that higher consciousness, then probably we'll come to a meeting point in which it'll be very easy to come to consensus. Not even a majority decision, but actual consensus in which all of us come together in agreement. So think about how valuable your words are. I sometimes recall the words that Brahma Baba spoke to me way back in the 60s. And I very definitely remember the words of wisdom that Mama would speak. And again, that would have been, in particular, my meeting with her in 1964 in Mumbai. And that's a long, long time ago, longer before than most of you were around. But at that time, she was in Bombay, and she spoke a few words, but her words were filled with sweetness. And it wasn't just a sweet voice, it was a sweetness of love. She wanted to communicate with you, with her heart to your heart. And she succeeded beautifully because her heart was filled with love. And so the few words she spoke carried great impact and value. And so Mama is a very good example of elevated thinking, pure thinking, minimalist thinking, keeping the mind silent more and more, wasting less energy and achieving more, less expenditure and greater splendor. This was an expression that Brahma Baba would use often, and Mama was very much the embodiment of that. Less expenditure of energy and greater splendor, greater power, greater spirituality, greater impact, greater effect. And so Mama's words, they would touch the heart and we would keep them in our hearts. And then our actions. Are my actions helpful, useful, constructive? Or am I wasting my time running around here and there and not achieving very much? Well, the clarity of thinking guides all of this. The way I speak, the way I behave, the way I perform, the way I relate to others. And then Of course, my character is determined by the quality of my actions, and beyond my character is my life and my destiny. And so this is why my thoughts create my own destiny. And so if I want a future which is elevated, I just need to pay attention to what's going on at the present moment. I don't have to build castles in the air. I just have to be very introverted. And introversion doesn't mean cutting off from anyone, but introversion means in touch with myself. And of course, if I'm in touch with myself, then it'll be easier to be in touch with you in a very genuine way. And if I'm not in touch with myself, everything is externalized, everything is superficial, I can't be in touch with you. And so however many words we speak, we're not really communicating. And this happens so often. A lot of hot air, a lot of words, but no results at the end of it. But everything meaningful and significant when I'm aware of the quality of my thinking and how this impacts everything on every level that I do. My actions filled with benevolence, with kindness, with care, with concern for others, all of that is what is needed at this moment, especially, of course, it's always needed, but especially when people are going through a huge amount of fear and uncertainty. This is the time when the economy of my thinking means purity. And the pure thoughts and good wishes that I have, that's going to be able to reach them, filled with love and compassion, and that's going to be of service. So actions of service to others is the great need. I don't have to worry about myself. If I'm concerned about serving, there'll always be goodness for me that comes back to me in return. Benevolence reaching out means that compassion comes back and helps me also. So thoughts, words, actions, but also finance. Yes, absolutely vital. Economy in that too. Because I don't know what the future holds. Today I have a good job. Today I have a good salary. Tomorrow I don't know whether that's going to continue. It's very interesting how when Didi came to the West, Didi Jayanti, this was in 1974, and I was translating for her most of the time. Of course, there would be later on. In 74, there were only a few people who could speak Hindi and were coming to the center, literally a handful. The larger class was Westerners. And then as time went on, and there was more and more immigration, the number of students from India continued to grow. But in those early days, it was mostly translation, which was great because I learned so much by translation. And so translating for Didi, when Didi would meet people from the West, and they would say to her, Didi, how can we be better yogis? And she would say, yoga means discipline in thoughts, words, and actions, so that you have the space, you have the time to be able to know yourself well, connect with God, and take all that God has to offer. And so they would get into more detail and they would say, what do you suggest about our timetable and our jobs? And she'd say, job is very important because that's the foundation for your life. And so, yes, make sure that you're fulfilling the responsibility of your job with sincerity, with dignity, with honesty, so that that's your yoga too. The way you perform at work is going to tell people whether you're a yogi or not. And then they'd come to the subject of finance, and she'd ask them, well, how much do you save? And they'd say, not very much. And then they'd say, but I'm not even sure exactly. I'll go and find out, and I'll come back and tell you. And she would give them a very simple formula. She would say to them, if they were single, which meant that they had no other responsibilities, she would say to them, 25% of your income should be savings. And their jaw would drop. Why? Because mostly they weren't thinking about that. They literally were not thinking about it. And she would say, 50% of your income should be for whatever your needs are, your accommodation, your living expenses, and all of that. And 25% you can use for charity. Whatever is a charity that touches your heart. But that is then the physical saving is for your life now in the future. But the work that you do for charity is going to be for your future in the long term, in your future lives. And of course, by then they'd understood about karma, they'd understood about rebirth, and so they understood where she was coming from. So it was a very novel idea to most of those young people who were coming to us at that time, that you had to think about savings. But I think in Bharat, I don't know the situation today, but generally speaking, there has been that awareness of savings. But now just thinking more about what are my needs? And actually, needs for a human being can be very, very, very small, not a huge amount. So where am I spending my money? Let me work it out and see for myself and see if I can simplify my life. We know about decluttering in terms of the things around us and how if I declutter my world outside, I'm more likely to be able to declutter my mind inside. Both are very clearly connected. Same thing. If I can simplify my life in terms of what I need and what are my real wants, then I can also probably simplify what's going on in here so that my time and energy is saved. Again, that's a huge subject. What is the most valuable thing that I have? My thoughts and my time. I've spoken about thoughts, but my time. A moment passes by in a flash, it's never going to come back again. You know, they talk about if you're holding sand in your fingers and the sand is slipping out, you try and catch the sand that's slipping out. And if you try and catch it, the rest of the sand falls out. And so time, I can't catch time once it's passed. And so don't let time slip through your fingers. Let me use my time in the best way possible, with integrity, with honesty, fulfilling my responsibilities. But also my responsibilities are not just to care for me and to care for my immediate family. Surely there's a contribution I want to make to the world. Am I giving time to the community out there? Am I using my talents and skills to be able to serve the world out there, especially at a time such as this, in which so many are in a state of desperate need? And so let me be able to do that also. If I can take care of these things in terms of economy, what I will find is peace in my own mind, love in my heart, wisdom in my intellect, and my words will be of encouragement and support to many others out there. Also, what I will find is that my life becomes valuable. I'll find happiness and joy when my own life is valuable, because I'm using all my treasures in the most economical way, in the best possible way. And in that quality of life, and of course, to be able to have mastery over all of these treasures, I need to be able to use the power of silence. When I meditate, that's what I'm doing. I'm experiencing that inner state of silence in which my mind is open to be able to not just speak to God, but to hear what God has to say to me. When we are praying, our mind is racing. And maybe after some time of prayer, the thoughts become a little bit quieter, and then it's not a mechanical repetition of words, but I'm able to keep my mind calm. And meditation is that stage in which I'm not just putting my thoughts to God, but I'm learning to keep my mind quiet and still so that I can hear what God says to me. You know, sometimes you're in a telephone conversation and you want to say something, and the other person also wants to say something, but your voices are clashing. And so at some point you say, okay, I'm listening. I'll be quiet now. And then you can hear what the other person has to say. Well, if my mind is chattering, even in prayer, it's busy, busy, busy. I'm not listening to what God can say to me. And so important that I'm able to stop my thinking, or at least move it very, very slowly so that I can hear what God has to say to me. But also think about it, how when you're hearing music, then it's not just noise all the time. There's a space between the sound, and that makes the music even more special. It makes it alive. It reaches you. It touches your heart. Same thing. My thoughts, a little bit of quiet. In that quiet space, the spaces become longer between the thoughts, and in those spaces, I'm able to experience. Otherwise, just the flow of thoughts, and there's no experience. But I want to be able to experience, and so this is the way to be able to reach that. I've spoken about economy of words, but I've spoken a lot. But let me stop here and see if there are questions or comments that you'd like to make.
Okay. Thank you, Sister Jayanti. It was indeed good. You have been economical, don't worry, because you have stopped 10 minutes before, but that's perfectly fine. So we make sure that you have been an embodiment of economy, that's for sure today. Let me just, since we have a bit of time, I just wanted to make a recap because you inspired me to do that. You said you can sum up the talk in 3 minutes. So just for the benefit of the audience, I would just like to mention what Didi has mentioned. The first thing Didi mentioned was economy is at the heart of all the things, and I think that's very important. Then she touched upon 5 important things like thoughts, word, and action, which we say mansa, vacha, karmana in Hindi, and very important time, and also finance. There are quite a few questions, Didi, on finance. I'll ask you that as well. Hope you may like them because they seem quite logic to us, but that's fine. And Didi mentioned in thoughts, I think it was a beautiful thing that pay attention to the flowers, not the weeds, because flowers are your beautiful, positive thoughts. Second thing you mentioned was words. Is it really necessary to speak? And before speaking, just ask those questions. There are quite a few stories which people recite in the path of devotion, that before you speak, just check on those questions which you already covered for us. And lastly, about the word, I like that what you said, that move from debates and discussion to consensus, because that saves a lot of time and energy and even money sometimes. And the last thing, which it was a beautiful thing on 4 aspects: peace in the mind, love in the heart, the wisdom needs to be there needs to be wisdom in the intellect, and words of encouragement. And lastly, as you mentioned, that we should start moving from prayer to meditation, and in that meditation which you will be doing for us today, definitely we have to experience pause in between that. I must not say dead space, but the silent and the sweet space in between, and experience that to help in developing the virtue of economy for all of us. Should I start taking the questions now? Yeah. So the first one is a person is saying that at the Brahma Kumaris, we are taught to be be in unlimited mode, behad, be carefree and open-hearted. So does economy mean that you all are teaching us to become a miser?
Interesting, because just as being introverted doesn't mean that you're cutting off from anyone, economy means having the wisdom to know where to use my paisas and my rupees and my dollars and my cents. Economy means having that understanding. If you're using $10 for a positive cause, it's not enough. Why not 100? But if you're using even $1 for something which is wasteful, then what's the point of that? It's of no purpose at all. And so I think you have to see what is it that is necessary and what is it that's beyond the limits of necessity for myself. And then if I'm serving others, what is it that is going to be well used? How is it being used? What is the purpose it's being used for? I think you have to have that wisdom. So economy means using the resources that I have with understanding, with wisdom.
Right. Excellent. Thank you, Didi. Someone is asking that you touched upon the economy of thoughts, but is there something called emotional economy? Because they're citing an example here that I am hurt and someone has hurt me through their deeds. And at Brahma Kumaris, we are taught that don't be hurt or don't take suffering and don't give suffering. So can I do something so that I don't feel hurt? So can I economize on my emotions?
I used an expression that I think may have struck home for many, that hurt people hurt people. And so why Baba has told us, and by Baba I'm meaning the Supreme, don't take sorrow and don't give sorrow. And so in not giving sorrow, well, that's within my capacity. I can make sure that my thoughts, my words, my actions are not giving sorrow to anyone. It takes a lot of attention, but it's possible. It's something that I'm in charge of, but I'm not in charge of what other people think and say and do. But I am in charge of what it is I take from all of that. Now, here's somebody who's maybe having bad thoughts about me, and it even reaches me, I can feel it. But can I at that moment, instead of thinking, oh, he's a bad person or she's a bad person, no, let me just send them positive vibrations so that then with those positive vibrations and God's light and love, they'll also calm down. Whatever it is that was causing them to have bad thoughts, that will change. It'll be transformed. Brahma Baba demonstrated this in his own life. The power of good wishes for others can take away the bad intentions of others and transform others. And so that's one level. I'm within a gathering. Somebody is saying very demeaning things about me, very bad things about me. Am I able to maintain my own inner dignity and stay calm? If I can do that, that will win the hearts of everybody around me. But if they're demeaning me and I then react with anger or hurt, no difference between them and me. I'm just giving back and lashing out in kind, whatever it is they've said to me. And people will say, you know, there's a conflict between these two and they're going to turn away. They're not going to be interested. But if they see me hold my peace and maintain my dignity, because my dignity is in my own hands, my state of being and my emotional state, again, Raj Yoga teaches me mastery so that I'm able to maintain my good wishes for them I'm able to maintain my peace, my calm, so that I remain unaffected. So I would say that this is a way in which I'm able to maintain economy in terms of wasteful thinking, wasteful speaking, not just in terms of my emotions, but in terms of all my energy, because I get into a debate with them. You said this, I said this. It's not going to reach any result at that moment. Even if that person is totally wrong, if you try and defend yourself, but it didn't mean it like this, it wasn't like this, they're not in the mood to listen. So at that moment, to remain silent and keep my thoughts and feelings very clean and pure is economy, but it's also then the way in which things will move on, and later at another time when they're more peaceful, then you can put your side of the picture.
Wonderful, Didi, for explaining that. Another wonderful question, I must say, quite humorous actually. Someone is asking that you all speak about the deity world, right? Which is full of abundance, and they really are fully clad with jewelry and so many other things. So are deities economical?
The deities in their past birth have been very economical. And I'd like to bring in another word, which is a Hindi expression, but ek nami, economy, ek nami. The deities have focused their attention on God and have been able to draw God's love, God's strength, God's power. And what I like about the deities is their purity, their love, their joy, their ability to communicate with themselves, with each other, with nature, with the birds and bees and the beasts of that world. Total harmony on all levels. The treasures of the world are there for them to use. The abundance is there. So they're not wearing jewels because they're expensive. They're wearing jewels because they're beautiful and because they're there, available for all, not just to be kept in the treasure store of a few, but available to everyone, just part of the beauty of nature and the part of the abundance that's available for everyone. But the economy has happened in their previous birth that gave them the capacity then to be able to share and care and enjoy.
Right, that was a beautiful. Actually, this answers the next question of the person. They were asking that if we practice economy as all of you at Brahma Kumaris do, can we become deities? So you already answered that question. Okay, I'll take a few questions on finance. They have spoken about, and this is quite a deep question. The brother or sister is asking that, is there any guideline in Brahma Kumaris that we must not invest in shares? And is that equal to gambling spiritually?
Brahma Baba used to tell us, and I won't say that it's an instruction from Shiv Baba, but I will say that Brahma Baba was very much a person who'd experienced life in all its different forms, whether it was through a very simple beginning, through hard work, to the point of being a jeweler with abundance, and then further the period of renunciation and the period when there was not even enough to eat. And so Baba would say to them, go to the mountains and eat the berries on the trees for breakfast. So all of that happened. So Baba had a very rich experience of life in all its different forms, in many, many different ways. And so Baba would say that work hard, earn your money with dignity, but don't get into stocks and shares and things like this. So that was what Brahma Baba did himself. He accumulated his wealth with hard work and his own intelligence and skills. And so whatever it is we do today, if we can do the same, whatever skills I have, whatever time and energy I have, if I use it in a very sincere way with integrity, then the results that are going to come to me are going to be abundant.
Right. Didi, you mentioned about popcorn. which means heated argument between people. So one of the brothers is asking, I'm sure he's relating it to that itself, how to caramelize the popcorn.
By popcorn, I meant it's a heated discussion. There's also many ideas coming from here and here and here and here. And so do I want to caramelize that popcorn? I don't think so. In that heat, there's too many things that are going on and no clarity. And so sometimes within our own meetings, what we would say, okay, let's take a moment of silence, and then we'll start our discussion again. And what we find is that in that moment of silence, we're connected with the One. That pure energy of truth and love is able to reach everyone. And then there's a more profound conversation. Then we're not caramelizing the popcorn, but what we're doing is going into a deeper sense of meaning of the subject, instead of keeping it superficial and dotted around here and there and here and there. Okay, let's look at the deeper significance and the deeper meaning. That perhaps would be more constructive and more creative. It would also bring good results.
Right. And actually, Didi, you already, I think, covered this, that should not give sorrow and take sorrow, or neither take suffering or give suffering. But someone is saying that he or she wants to know about this type of slavery. They say that when someone else can determine whether I'm happy or unhappy, which means giving the remote control of my life to someone else, is that not the worst kind of slavery which I am going through?
I wouldn't have used that term, but obviously you're in that condition where you're feeling that you are. A very important question to ask myself: why am I choosing to be a victim? What is it that the oppressor is giving me? And if I can clarify that for myself, is it my attachment? Is it my, what is it? What is it that I want from the oppressor that allows them to continue to be the master in charge of me? And what I want is to become the self-sovereign, to be the master of my own thoughts and feelings and emotions, but also the master of my choices, the master of my life, the master of my destiny. And definitely Raj Yoga, the word Raja, the sovereign, the master. This is the yoga with the highest on high, to draw that power and that wisdom, to be able to understand how to become the master of the self, a sovereign of the self, so that I'm not in bondage to situations or to things or to people, but I'm able to make the decisions that I want to make for my own life, and I'm able to carry them forward in my life. And definitely, yes, I mustn't allow myself to be controlled remotely by somebody else. And most of us usually are. If this person's happy, then I feel happy. And if this person's upset, then I get upset. But no, I don't know what's making them unhappy. And it's up to them to sort out their unhappiness. If I have caused them unhappiness, then it's my responsibility to sort it out. Seek forgiveness or make amends in whatever way. But if truly my conscience is saying there's nothing wrong that I have done that can cause some sorrow, then I don't take that guilt on my head and go out of my way to try and pacify them. What I can do is then, at that moment, again, dignity, my own inner dignity and stability. And with that inner state of stability, I can give them God's light and God's love so that they may have peace and their hurt may be healed by God. So definitely, Raj Yoga teaches you mastery and helps you move away from being a victim or a slave.
Right, wonderful. This question is very closely related to what Dadi Janki usually says. I'm sure you have an n number of experiences with Dadi Janki. I remember even Asha Didi and you also in your talks have mentioned this because it relates to that question. Dadi Janki used to say, don't think or stop thinking. So the brother is asking, not related to Dadi Janki, but it just reminded me of that quote of Dadi Janki. So brother is asking that when we are in the process of making a decision or a problem solving, we have to really consider all options, and we are actually taught to consider multiple options. So if my thinking is limited, or you all say you don't have to think, how can I get the correct option?
It's like a car has a brake and an accelerator. So you're not going to use both together. You know how to use the brake, you know how to use the accelerator, and you do what is needed at the right time. So what Dadi is saying when she's saying don't think is where we see that somebody's overthinking. If you overcook something, what happens? It gets soggy. You don't feel like eating it. All its vitamins are lost. There's many doctors here, so you can verify that. Same thing. If I'm thinking and rethinking, it's not useful. But yes, when I want to make plans, let me spend a few moments in silence to be able to release that intuition, the creative energy, the connection with the divine, so that I can be guided in that silence. And then, yes, make a plan. But if my intellect is caught up with maybe this, maybe that, maybe the other, it's going to be a washout. Everything is going to be crumpled and overcooked. And so there's a time to plan, and there's a time to stop thinking and to say, Om Shanti. Let me keep my mind very clean and clear. And then let me make a plan. And once I've made the plan, again, sit in silence, so that then in that silence, your intuition will again give you the response whether you're on track or not on track. And if you think about all the stories we hear about Archimedes and Newton and all these things, it was when they weren't thinking of the problem, but they were in a state of relaxation. Archimedes in his path, totally relaxed. Newton sitting under the apple tree, totally relaxed. And the idea comes. This is the solution. This is what it's all about. And so he understood what gravity meant, and then he understood the Archimedes principle. And so the best ideas come when your mind isn't overthinking. We've had evidence of this. Creativity begins when the mind is clear, is free and relaxed. And so don't overthink. Think in a minimalistic way, economically, when it's time to think. And then when you've thought it through, Om Shanti. Spend a few moments in silence, and you'll know whether you're on track or not on track. And if you are on track, fine, things will move ahead. If you're not on track, at that moment, there'll be a bell ringing in your head telling you, no, go back and see those plans, sort it out. There's something more that needs attention.
Sure. So we'll take this last question, and you can elaborate a lot on that, because this question also is very interesting. You mentioned about one of the teachings in our Murlis, that is Kam Kharch Bala Nashin, which is less energy expenditure but great splendor. And you gave Mama's example. So one of the brothers is asking that in 1950s, we are very famous in the Brahma Kumaris that we went through a very tough time, a financial crisis at that point of time. And how did Brahma Baba and Mama really, at that point of time, through their meditative experience, how were they constantly and naturally successful in dealing with all these financial obstacles?
There were so many different stories that Dadi Janki used to relate to us of that period. And one of the stories some of you would have known, the cook went to ask Brahma Baba, what should we do today? There's nothing in the kitchen. There's nothing in the store. And Baba said to her, come at 12 o'clock and I will tell you. And the post used to come at 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock, a money order arrived in the post, and they were able to go buy things. And 12 o'clock, Baba was able to give her instructions of what to cook for lunch. If Baba had worried, if Baba had been fearful, if Baba had been anxious, I don't think things would have worked out so smoothly. But Baba's total trust and faith that it's God's work, I'm an instrument for God, God is responsible, I've done the best that I can in terms of my ability, my surrender, my love, my trust, and the rest is up to that one. So it wasn't that Baba just sat back and said, oh, don't worry, something will happen. No, from Baba's side, Baba had done the best that he could. But then there came a point when Baba said, okay, it'll be fine, just wait. On another level, very different, but the story of the Dadis in Delhi. Dadi Janki was one of the 3 Dadis who were there in Delhi early days in the 50s. And one of the students who was coming for Gyan, for yoga, etc., he asked them one day, can you show me your kitchen? And the Dadis looked at each other and they didn't know exactly why he was asking this question, but it was a tiny little place and the kitchen was just by the side. So they sort of signaled each other, fine. And he went into the kitchen and all he saw was this little gas stove and one canister and a little thing there, nothing else at all. And he said, what do you eat? And they looked at each other and smiled and they said, everything is fine. You don't need to worry. But he understood. And he sent a sack of flour and at least basic help. And what they did was they didn't use that sack. They put on the sack the address of Mount Abu, Brahma Baba, and the address of Mount Abu. And it was taken to the train station and it was sent to Abu. And so even when things arrived, they knew they had a bigger family sitting in Abu. And so their concern was for the bigger family. And so the love that Baba had instilled in their hearts, Mama had given them so much love that their thoughts were for the mother and father, and they wanted to support and help. So, and then of course he got to know and things began to move in a different direction as they continued to serve. So people came in to support and the rest is as you see. But this whole thing about economy, if I'm just concerned about me and myself, fine, let me work hard and I'll be able to take care. But when I'm not just concerned about me, I'm concerned about others with love, not attachment, but with love, then the universe will provide not only for the others, but also for me. And there was a question I'd asked Dadi at one point. Is it that, because Dadi was extremely generous, those of you who knew her would remember that, she would give you tuli, she would give you a book, she would give you a blessing, she would give you a gift, and then she'd still say, is there anything else you need? And if somebody did say something, she would manifest that. She would send somebody running around, looking around to get it, and it would be given. So I asked her the question, what comes first, abundance or generosity? And her reply was, when you have very little and yet you can be generous, abundance will automatically follow. And I remember when I was 8 years old, at that time in Pune, just a few months before we left to come to London, there would be a class for children in the garden, and the garden was not our garden, but it was next door where one of the students used to live. And Dadi's place, the center, was literally a little cubby hole. And it was the living room, the sitting room, the classroom, the sleeping room, everything was in that little room. And yet there would be about 8-10 of us children in the summer holidays in the month of May in 1957. And if perchance our class went on a bit later because there was a lot of play and activity, and she thought that maybe by the time the kids get home, they'll be very hungry. So she'd say, wait, and she'd go in and bring something for us. And at that time, it was just a little bit, but how much do children need? Not a huge amount, but it was enough. It was her love. But it was much later on. At that time, of course, then became abroad, and I didn't think about things like this. But when we came back to India, I was about 14 at that point. I understood at that time that at that point, what she gave us all must have been the lunch for herself and the other sister who lived with her at that time. And it wasn't that they had extra. It meant that they would go without lunch that day. But her concern that by the time the children get home, it's going to be late for them. And she'd want to give us even a little bit so that then it would keep us going till that time. So when I have a big and generous heart, abundance comes. I've seen this time and time again in many, many beautiful ways with Brahma Baba, with Mama. Somebody would bring a cardigan for Baba, a sweater for Baba. And they would say, Baba, we know how cold it is in Abu. And so we brought this for you. And Baba would want to honor them by accepting it. Baba would not reject it and refuse it. And Baba would keep it. And when Baba would see that somebody was needy and needed something more, Baba wouldn't say, I need it. Baba would just use a shawl. Baba used very little more than that. But Baba would then say, child, you need this, and would give it. Not because I have so much that I want to give it away. I don't have, but you need it more than me. And so the generous heart then leads to abundance. And you can experiment with it yourself in your life, and you'll see that it is a reality.
Well, thank you so much, Didi. It's the first Q&A session in our so many episodes. It's went on for 30 minutes. So though you didn't take time on the talk, but we are so happy that you patiently answered all the questions. I'm sure all the participants would be really happy. So now I would request Dr. Ashok Mehta to propose the vote of thanks to Didi. Over to you, Dr. Mehta.
Om Shanti, Jayanti Ben.
Om Shanti.
You always touch the heart. You have said so many beautiful things, but I think the last things which you told about Dadi touched the maximum. Dadi, we loved her so much, and we knew how economical she was for herself, but she was always full of abundance for everyone else, as you said. I had experienced the same thing with my mother's mother, grandmother on the mother's side. She used to live in Palanpur. That is just one station before Abu Road. And that was an area at that time was a very dry area, very little rains. Water was always a scarcity. Water had to be brought from a few kilometers away. And when, as a children, we used to go from Mumbai to Palanpur. And that time the chuk-chuk garis, those were running with charcoal. So it would be all completely dark, full of, and we used to go from Mumbai. So we had habit of using more water. And she would take a tabak of water, maybe a few liters, and she would give us a bath using very little water and scrubbing with a rough stone and using very little of. So I used to ask, why do you economize so much? So she would tell that, how the water comes from a distance and it's brought an ox And, it had to go in open streets. There were no drainage arrangements. So it would have a lot of insects, and we were giants, so it would cause, a lot of hurt to the insects and killing. And that's the time when we learned about the economy of life. And even today, when I take a shower, I always think of her and never waste too much of water. So I think it comes through experiences in our life. What you have said, you are talking about the environment and the world concerned about it. And I really feel that you are doing such a wonderful work, such a beautiful work. And I must thank you for sharing your beautiful thoughts in so much of, on a larger scale, right from Shiva Baba down to all of us. Thank you very much. And you have really economized in time in terms of finishing it much earlier. Thank you very much. Om Shanti.
Thank you, Dr. Mehta. Om Shanti.
So thank you, Dr. Mehta and Sister Jayanti, for that excellent rendition on economy. And we'll be going in the meditation mode. But before that, I would request quickly Brother Kamlesh to do the announcements for the next series. Yeah, over to you, Brother Kamlesh.
Thank you, Manoj Bhai. Let me just share my screen.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for that wonderful talk, Sister Jayanti. So here are our next upcoming programs. The next Values of Life series will happen this month on the 26th. It is Saturday again in Vancouver. So it starts the same time at 7:30 a.m. Vancouver time. And then there's a few other times listed there. It's 8 p.m. in India, 3:30 p.m. in UK, and so on and so forth. As well as it will be like this program, we are translating in about 7 different languages. So this program right now we are translating in Arabic, French, German, Hindi, and Spanish. And there will be more languages added as we get closer to the program. Continue to check us on our website and our Facebook page. So again, coming back to that talk of to this talk, so it is this episode 16 on the 26th of June will be on the value of responsibility. In Hindi, Zimmedari. It will be by Asha Didi. She is the director of the Om Shanti Retreat Center in Delhi. So looking forward to seeing you there. Next, we have, if you are looking for more information on these programs, you can go to our 2 websites, vihasa.in or vancouver.brahmakumaris.ca. You can always email us for more information, or you can leave a chat message with us and we will respond to you. Additionally, all our talks are on our YouTube page. So on the YouTube page, you can see the past talks are there about in Hindi and in English, and there's a few other languages as well. So you can come to Brahma Kumaris Vancouver. You can look this up on YouTube, and you will find all the past talks and values programs and all the other programs that we have hosted. They're all listed over here. And finally, our website. So welcome to Brahma Kumaris in Vancouver. Again, it's there's a lot of resources there. There's resources on inspiration, on events, on doing meditation courses. So if there's anything that you need, you can always click on the Contact Us button at our website, and we will be able to provide you with more information. And of course, we are on multi-platform. So we are on Facebook, we are on YouTube, and of course, our website is there as well. So if there's any questions you have, please reach out to us in one of those methods, and we will get back to you. Over to you, Manoj Bhai.
Thank you, Brother Kamlesh. So without much ado, over to Sister Jayanti for the silent meditation on economy. Thank you.
just carry on sitting comfortably and let yourself relax so that the body is comfortable and the mind can be free, and go on an inner journey. And if you wish, you can keep your eyes open and focus on that point of light that you see behind me. I create the thought, I am a soul. And I allow myself to feel the being of light that I am within. And as I connect with myself, I feel the peace that lives within me. I am a being of peace. I radiate and shine. And this peace reaches out into the world. And in this awareness of peace, I can feel the presence of the divine, the supreme, the being of light. And from the ocean of peace, peace reaches out and the power of peace touches human hearts. The power of peace reaches out to all creatures, all beings, and even the elements of nature itself. And as we stay connected with the Supreme, the power of peace multiplies. And peace returns to this world of ours again. Just using the power of our thoughts and the connection with the divine, we can be instruments to bring peace back in this world. This is the power of economy and the remembrance of one to accomplish a huge task for benefit for the world. Om Shanti.
So thank you, Didi, and wonderful. Thank you for joining all of you all. See you next time.